It's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is embezzle. Let's take a moment and look at the definition of this verb. The verb embezzle is used to mean to steal or misuse money that belongs to the organization or company for which one works. So this verb came up in a recent lesson I had with students, and some were saying, so steal and embezzle are the same thing. And they're not exactly. So what's key here is that when we use this word, we mean essentially someone stole money from the employer. So you have to be employed. You have to have a job before one can engage in this verb. And you definitely should not do this particular action, right? This breaks many laws. So I want to be very careful. I'm not encouraging anyone to do this, but that is an important part of this definition. You need to be employed in order to use this verb. You should know that embezzle is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, you're going to drop the E and add ing to form embezzling. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding D, since this verb already ends in an E. Now, the base verb, embezzle, ends in an L sound. And sometimes this is tricky for students because you see the E on the end. You can think of the E as being silent. So L is the last sound in the verb. And that means when I add the ED ending, I'm just going to make a D sound. I'm not adding an extra syllable. So this isn't an id sound. It's just duh, duh. Embezzled, embezzled. Okay. You might be happy to know no additional phrasal verbs for us to study. So now we can focus on practicing our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today we're going to practice the past progressive, also known as the past continuous, and the past perfect. Let's start with the past progressive. We use the past progressive to talk about actions that were ongoing during a certain period of time in the past. Sometimes in sentences, you'll see two verbs used in this progressive tense, in the past progressive, right? And we're really talking about two things that were ongoing together at that particular time. Other times you might see a past progressive verb and then a simple past tense verb. That's the interrupting action. So the whole point of past progressive or past continuous is really to indicate to someone who's reading or listening to you that this was an action that was progressing or continuing. Now, the reason I like calling this the past progressive is that the two P's there can help you remember that you need two parts to make your verb. So we're going to start with a subject. If the subject is I, he, she, or it, I'm going to use was, and then the ing form the verb. But if my subject is you, we, or they, I'm going to use were, and then the ing form the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. Two school officials were embezzling money from the district while they were simultaneously fundraising for new initiatives in the district. So here's one of those examples where we have two past progressive verbs. We have were embezzling, were fundraising. So these are the sentence is describing two actions that were ongoing in the past. Now, if you want to make a negative past progressive sentence, what you're going to do is start with your subject. Again, you'll use was or were, then not, and then the ing form the verb. Here's another example. My client wasn't embezzling from his employer. Okay? This might be a sentence you hear a lawyer, an attorney say, my client. Right? Because like we said earlier, this is a crime. And many people do get arrested, serve time. They might even be required to pay things back, pay the money they have stolen back to the company. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the past progressive. To do this, I start with was or were, then I'm going to have my subject, and then the ing form the verb. Here's the last past progressive example. Was she embezzling money from the company the entire time she was working there? This isn't a question. We might say, yes, she was, or no, she wasn't. Let's move on and talk about the past perfect. In this verb tense, we're choosing to use it to indicate that a particular action occurred before some other action or before a certain time in the past. Again, you'll notice there are two P's to make my verb tense, and that means I'm going to need two parts to my verb. So in the past perfect, I'm going to have my subject, then I'm going to use had, H-A-D, that's the past form of have, and then I use the participle form of my verb. And because embezzle is a regular form, my participle looks the same as the simple past tense. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The bookkeeper had embezzled nearly $300,000 from the company before the missing funds were noticed. So this verb tense here is really trying to get our attention about how much had been stolen before the other past action, the idea of noticing, like, hey, we're missing money, something's gone. Okay? Now, let's take a look at a negative past perfect sentence. To do this, we always have a subject. Again, we use had, but now we add not, and then the participle form. An example of this might be, he said that he hadn't embezzled even 1 cent of the church's money. Okay? So here in this sentence, right, I've seen many examples as I looked for different situations where people had used this verb. This is something I saw different forms, many people kind of stating their innocence from alleged crimes. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the past perfect. To do this, I start with had, then I'm going to have my subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's the last example. Had she embezzled money from other companies? Okay. So we might be asking if this occurred before her current company, and it sounds like she is being accused of embezzling again. Now let's move on and talk about some words that are related to our verb embezzle. The first word we're going to talk about today is the noun embezzlement. This noun is, again, referring to theft or misappropriating, kind of sending money maybe kind of to the wrong spot. That might be a good way to think of that word, misappropriate. So the theft of funds, money that has been placed in one's trust because generally of employment agreements or employment responsibility. An example of this, he was charged with embezzlement and tax fraud. Okay, so you will again see examples of this listed as a crime. Another related word you will see is the noun embezzler. This is someone who secretly takes money that's supposed to be in their care, or it's supposed to belong to the organization or company that they work for. An example of this might be the embezzler promised to repay the donations. Now, some people might be asking, like, wow, how often does this happen? Is this a common problem? And it happens quite often. Sometimes in really small organizations where there's not a lot of control or not others kind of checking up on the people who have access to make funds available to others or pay vendors for products and services. So if this happens to be a new word for you, I'm a little sorry to say you're going to be able to find lots of different examples of this. So thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.